Hey, good morning and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I'm here with Andrew from Magic Pig Games, or Infinity PBR on the Asset Store. And today we're going to be talking about RPG development, a couple other topics that we might dive into as well, game dev related, but I think we've got a lot of RPG stuff to talk about, and should be a lot of fun. If you've got questions, comments, please drop them in chat, say hello, and please hit the thumbs up button, and we'll get started. So hello, Andrew. How's it going, man?
Good. How about you? I'm doing well.
Oh, pretty good. Just a little bit energized. I just got done streaming that RPG building, kind of copying you, stealing from your strategy of just live streaming some development and showing people how to put stuff together while building something that I've been wanting to put together forever. So been this game in my head. I just want to make the game, have fun making the game, get it done and knocked out. Like I was telling you, in a couple weeks, ideally, probably a couple months, but I want to shoot for a couple weeks and just having a lot of fun with that. So it's been a good morning so far.
I like how you're aiming for a couple weeks. My goal, just like college, was, it's not a race. 7 years is fine.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's always just like I got to set timelines that are super tight, because then even if I miss my timeline a little bit, I'm still well within a good time. So if I set a couple weeks and it takes me a couple months, that'll be fine. But if I set it for a couple months, it's probably going to take me a couple years. And like getting a tight timeline just forces me to really prioritize stuff and get stuff done and be super productive. Oh, Beard Dye mentioned we'll be doing the VR game jam hosted by Justin at 1:00. Awesome. In VR with Andrew. Hey, get Justin and Andrew to hop in sometime. That'd be cool. I would love to kind of hear more about the VR stuff. And plus, I've been, I don't have my backpack with me. I have my Quest in my backpack now. I've been just dragging it along, using it constantly for playing around and getting different ideas. This game I probably won't put into VR, but there's a small chance that I'll still be tempted. I'm surprised at how much better it's gotten. Go ahead.
Yeah, years I had the DK2. I think it was a DK2, Oculus Quest Development Kit 2, back in the day, and it worked on Mac. That was before they stopped Mac support and ruined my VR dreams. But I threw it. Of course, I got it, and I threw it at a cave in. I think it was the manufacturer K4 cave, and I put in. I don't think I had my dragon at the time. I think I put in another dragon that I had, and I made a very sliced RPG experience inside this VR thing, and I was blown away. And I was in this cave, and there was fire, and there was this giant dragon, and it was of course huge. And this was early VR, and I was amazed. And I was like, "This is amazing! I can't wait to make a VR version of my RPG." I've always scoped that back since then, but I still look forward to experiencing those things in VR, even though the motion sickness thing is real. For moving around in that type of RPG. But, if I have a giant warehouse, maybe I can walk around.
Oh, yeah. Just build it where you can run around in real life. An interesting RPG. Just play until you pass out.
Yeah, I've always, the other one of my pipe dreams I've always wanted to do when I become a billionaire later this year will be a VR, like a laser tag VR thing experience. So it could be laser tag, it could be fancy, but a real VR experience where you do run around. They've got those. I think it's I forget the name of it. It's like a big one in Utah, I think it is, Colorado or something.
I didn't talk about the Void ones. There's also a lot of it seems like I don't know if they still do, but a lot of the casinos had them too. They had, like, when there was a lot of VR stuff going on, they built out these like VR rooms and setups. The MGM had one with a bunch of different games, and I think a couple of the other casinos had their own versions of them too, where you could run around and play these, big. They've got lots of space, these big, basic, like giant warehouse rooms that you're playing these really cool VR games with more advanced stuff than a lot of the home tech, right? Like you're using the very expensive custom setups that are built for that. But there's a lot of fun. Highly recommend if you're in one of those places, you can try it out. Even if you're just at somewhere where it's got the Void one, where it's not. At least the ones that I did were not combat related. Kind of, I guess technically they were, but they weren't like PvP, like the the Vegas ones. It was super cool though, like really fun experiences where the whole world was kind of integrated around, and you're going around picking up objects and interacting with physical switches that are re-represented digitally to look different, and looking like Star Wars and other cool stuff. So
that's so cool. That I'm sure I gotta try it out. I gotta like take a trip out just to try it one day.
It's worth it. I mean, just if you, you know what? I think they might have gotten rid of it at Disneyland with the COVID stuff. But I would check and see if you can find a place that's got the void places. I mean, it's not a big time commitment. You're looking at an hour, go in and out and all that, and it's a lot of fun. It's definitely a different experience. So I'd say it's worth trying out for sure.
Nice.
Cool. Let's see. I don't think there are other questions on here. I just want to double check. Anyway, so I guess before we dive into RPG building, you had a couple new RPG related assets that just came out, right?
Yeah. So this week, just last night, got the low poly birdie out, which is maybe one of my favorite low poly ones at this point. I think it
looks cool.
Yeah. So there's a high fidelity birdie as well. And so that's why I make the high fidelity ones and we convert them to low polys. They have the same animations and all that. But this one just lends itself to low poly really well. And it just came out really neat. So I'm a fan of that one. And then the Demon Dog was also released. And now the low poly Demon Dog is out as well. And I
fixed the price. I had it backwards. It said it was on sale for double price. It's on sale for half off, right?
It's twice as much. If you like it so much,
if you want it the first week, you got to pay double, right?
Yeah, well, that's like the Blizzard style. I wanted to play Diablo 4 because I was bored, and my mom was visiting, and she, was right there, and I was like, well, I can't make a lot of noise, can't stream, so all right, I'll play Diablo 4, and so I paid $20 more for it.
Yep. Gotta pay extra. Actually, I want to use this bird in the battler. I think it would be a cool one. That's like a perfect character for that.
Yeah.
Gets more characters in there. Do that sometime soon. Yeah. Be fun.
Yeah. A new pipeline that I've been working on with some outsourced companies. I've always been hesitant of outsourcing because every time I've tried in the past has been a shit show. And so this latest pipeline, one group doing the modeling and texturing, another group doing the animating, and me putting it all together and doing the production side of things has worked out pretty well. Birdie came out of that. There's another one that's a frog-based one called Jumper that's coming out. And I got the animations last night, and there's a few fixes as there always are. But I was looking, I was like, holy shit, this is a cool-looking frog thing. It's very animated in the face, and I'm like, man, they did a great job. So I'm very pleased right now.
Nice. You getting a bunch of characters made still? Like a bunch of different creatures, or?
I had 4 slated for this cute series. They're all based on AI art, by the way. So the concept art came out of the AI machine. But I had, let's see, I think two done, and then or maybe I have one more. I'll have to check if I got a third model. But then I switched them to the new human system. So we've been working on a new human system. I've been talking about a little bit more. I don't want to get people's hopes up because it's always like it's not guaranteed until it's guaranteed, but we're working on this new human system. And so the company that's doing the I think it's just a few people really, the guys and girls who are doing the character modeling and texturing are doing the humans, and they've got the base male and female bodies pretty much done. Now they're going to be working on the fat, strong, skinny, and weak versions. And then my system that I've already mostly built out magically brings them all together so that you can morph between those 2 different dimensions in any direction. So you can make a really fat, strong person, a fat, weak person, and anything in the middle, with the concept being that body should work for almost any humanoid body, generally speaking, that you can think of, from goblins to orcs to whatever. And then once that, modular heads as well. That's a modular heads, modular hands, modular feet, modular body parts. You can imagine a pirate pack with peg legs is in the future, based on the fact that you can turn off just one lower leg.
Okay.
Important thing. And hook hands. And so the idea is that once this is set up, then, faces, heads are really just another piece of wardrobe. You just attach, and then all the body armor, all the clothing is fully modular from the start because they're all using the same body, maybe different textures for the body, but the same body shape. So if you've got a shirt on one character, you can throw on a different head, throw on different hands if it's got creepy hands versus not creepy hands or whatever. And the same wardrobe will work on all of them instantly.
Nice. And it's all because they're just using the same blend shapes, right? So it all just goes together. You can swap out the armor. So with that, can I just take like a bird head and put them on an orc?
In theory, yes. So that's we'll see how crazy we can get with bird heads. But you think Skyrim and cat heads. The idea is as long as it attaches on the neck, as long as that works, then yeah. And in some cases, if a bird head on an orc might not look good on the seam, right? Right here it might look weird, but the cut of the head and neck or the chest and neck is lower than the collar should be on the wardrobe. So that if it doesn't look right, it doesn't matter. You're going to turn off the chest anyways because you can now turn that off. That's one of the things you can't do in my current humans. You can't turn off the body.
Oh.
So that in that world, yeah, you could. You'd have a bird head, and the body would, if you're wearing full armor in that bird head, then you wouldn't even see the body. It wouldn't even be there. The shapes would be there. So you'd see that movement of the shapes, but the body itself would be invisible.
That makes sense. Do you have like a humanoid bird guy? I can't remember.
I do not.
Oh, okay. I'll have to come sometime.
I would like to have a humanoid bird guy, and I would like to have both sci-fi and fantasy armor and any other armor. But that's the whole point. If this works the way it does in my head, which sometimes things don't work out that way, but I think this one will, then yeah, you could have a bird head. And I'm hoping that other people who make content would be like, hey, I like this system. I'm going to make armor. I'm going to make new heads for it and stuff.
Yeah, and mix and match them. I like it. So there was a question, Gervais asked if there's a package that includes all the packages available from Infinity PBR. Is there like a mega bundle pack that just has everything? Or is that multiple packs?
There's not one that has everything. There's two giant packs. So the one we talk about a lot, I'll link it into the chat here so you can share it, is the RPG or the what's it called? Fantasy RPG FPS Complete 13-pack bundle. That's all SEO at that point. Let's be honest with ourselves. And that one has all the main characters, etc. And then for the high fidelity stuff, I released this giant bundle, which has 20 characters in it. Monster Collection #1 and Monster Collection 2, I will be releasing as well with also 20 characters. So it's not, I don't have a one purchase you get everything option, but I've got some one purchase you get a lot of it options.
Get most of it. Okay, so that's this one, and then we'll find the link for the other one, get that up there too, so everybody can check it out if you're curious and want to see them. I've been using your stuff since long before I knew you. It still feels really weird. Like I was using your dragon, back when I started using you. I was like, oh, this thing is crazy. It's super cool, and yeah, it's certainly nuts. I'm gonna pop this. I get this link up here real quick for everybody. Everybody can see it. Yeah. Now, I'm curious, was the dragon your first asset, or did you make a different one first?
The very, very first one was the gargoyle, actually. So that was the first one. So I had been working on the barbarian. I was using the asset store. I wanted more control over customization. Hence, Infinity was meant to be all about the control you have over it. And PBR was Unity 5 had just come out. And I thought, hey, everyone's going to be into PBR. I'll be the first PBR. That part didn't work out. Now I'm just stuck with the name. Magic Pig Games, though, if you haven't noticed, I'm just doing it very slowly because Magic Pig Games is so much cooler than Infinity PBR, which people just think is beer. For those who know about Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Really? See?
Yeah, and the people who are into game dev tech stuff probably think it's some shader thing, right?
Yeah, there's nothing special about the shaders, generally speaking. So, yeah, but so that was the whole thing, and so the gargoyle was the very, very first one that got out there, and then the mushroom monster was #2. And a fun trivia fact: the animator who did those is still doing animations with me. It's been
nice.
It's been a long time. I don't know how many years. I think it's been like almost 10 years, 9-10 years something. And she's still doing them. I've got other animations and animators throughout the time too, but she's still trucking away. We just actually updated the Weeper character with new animations from her. So we're trying to slowly update the older characters with running, jumping, strafing, directional got hits. So when they got hit from a direction that blends things to
bam or bam or
exactly. Because I got so annoyed when like somebody would get hit from the back and they
go.
And also two idles, so that the idle animations are automatically blended, so there's less of a loop and more of a dynamic realism. So the new characters always have that now. The old ones are getting updated. So Weeper just got updated last night as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's cool. It looks like your stuff is pretty popular, though. I mean, obviously, because I said I was using it long before I talked to you. I was using and recommending your stuff.
I appreciate it.
Let's take there was a question in here. I think it's asked it twice, and I want to make sure we get to it. And I'm not sure how you pronounce the letters there. DCCOO.
Oh, I was Coco.
But that's a C. Yeah. Somebody wants to know how to reference static functions, though, from any function in the inspector for their armor system. And I'm curious. I mean, in general, you should be able to reference a static function from anywhere. But if you're trying to get it in the inspector, I think you need to make a non-static method and then add that context menu is kind of the easiest way to do it. And then call into the static method from there. So if you add a context menu attribute, you could right click on it and then call that function. I would generally, if you're going to be doing it often though, do a quick search on how to make a button attribute or use Odin Inspector if you have it, or if I recommend Odin to everybody, but it's not something that you definitely need for this. You could just make a button script to handle this. But if you have Odin, just use that instead and add a button attribute and then call into the static function. But do you have other thoughts on this, things that they might be asking about that I'm missing?
Well, I was wondering if when they say the inspector, if they're talking about like a custom editor script.
Could be the custom editor or some object inspector.
Yeah,
like the inspector tab.
I'm trying to remind myself what I do. I've got static methods I use for my editor scripts called infinitypbr.infinityEditor, which is only for editor stuff, and it's got a bunch of methods that are static that oftentimes deal with like looking up, objects of specific types and stuff that work for my systems, for my inspectors. So I wasn't sure if that was. So that's just an abstract class, and it's one of those things that I always have to remind myself a little bit on how to set it up when I'm setting up a new one. Usually I just kind of reference the old one and be like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Yep. Yeah, usually I do kind of the same. Although, like I said, a lot of time I just do it with Odin. So I'll just make a new Odin editor window and then add in the thing. And the reason for that is with Odin, you just really add a bunch of attributes and it does most of the custom editor scripting stuff for you. So I don't have to go in and like find the target and adjust. I don't have to create buttons and all these other things. I just add in attributes and it makes an editor that works better than I would have done with no work at all. So that's that, and it just adds a bunch of extra cool stuff like from scratch. So even if I don't add attributes, I get a bunch of cool shit. So let's take a couple questions here. So there's a question: how much do you think it would cost to create an LMS that integrates with a Unity app? Which skill sets or tools should one learn to do that? I mean, the cost is going to vary. A learning management system?
What's a learning management system?
Like a system where you would go through and... unless I'm misunderstanding the question, it'd be one of those systems where you basically go through like doing virtual training type stuff. So it could be anything from like learning how to code, and it's maybe somewhat interactive, and like you write the code here and then you see the thing over there and then it tips you and hints and stuff, kind of like Unity's done in the past with some of their built on top overlay type stuff. But this would be separate or like built in Unity, or like it could also be more like a training situation too, where you're doing the the more physical training and building a system on top of that for, training, aircraft engineers or aircraft inspectors to go through and do stuff. You could build a system that kind of works on that. Now, how much it would cost is, cost you anywhere from $0 to $1 million, depending on who you hire to do it. It wouldn't. I would say that the integration part with Unity would be relatively easy, but building an LMS is like not something I've done myself. So I would assume there's going to be, depending on your scenario, lots of outside of Unity stuff that you're going to end up building and putting together as well. But the integration directly with Unity is pretty easy. Unity is built in C# and integrates with just about anything that you can integrate with C#. You can use some web services, do some direct process manipulation, or whatever it is that you need to do. Should be pretty easy. But I think what you've got to figure out is what that LMS looks like, and kind of get like I'd say more of a high level design nailed down first of what the user experience is like, and then you'd be able to do some more research on that. And what I would recommend for this is I would literally go into ChatGPT and be like, hey, what are some possible solutions and plans for this? I want to plan this out, and have it give you some recommendations on places to look for both like patterns and ways to build the system, but also things that you need to take into account and consider. I would start a long conversation with it. I personally use the ChatGPT Pro or 4 or whatever it is, the $20 a month one. And I would just start a long conversation with it on exactly this, and do it more than once. Do it once, and then the next day start a new chat, do it again, and kind of go through that and try to figure out what things you need and get a good plan, because it's going to build you out like this plan that you can kind of follow and adjust and adapt to. I wouldn't just use that as like your only thing, but I'd use that as a good starting point to kind of build out an outline for what it is you want to make, and how you might integrate it, and what different types of tools you might use for the other side of things. Or maybe you end up doing it all in Unity, depending on the use case. It really kind of varies. So that's what I would go with. I know, definitely talk to Shattered Souls. Definitely going to have lots of good advice there, I would say. Cool. Let's go on to another question. And you're very welcome. Thank you for the super chat. Sweet. All right. Is there any risk to indie game dev? The answer is no, right, Andrew?
No.
Totally risk-free.
Let's talk about how there's lack of no risk. First, people love nerds. Everyone knows that. So if you're a single person looking for the love of your life, everyone knows that the minute you tell them, oh, I make indie games, well, they realize
what's that?
Rich soon, because you're going to go viral. And second, you clearly are a very, very fun-loving person who likes to go outside every day, all day.
Yeah. So I take it you've been dealing with a risk here.
There's risks in all things, right? So this is a question that, of course, yes, the answer is yes. Of course, there's risks. It depends. Are you putting money? Like with my indie dev path, I went and spent all my savings on asset production. Had to get myself a job. Eventually, I broke even, but it took 5 years. So yeah, there's risks involved with that, but
So Dustin's comment made me laugh. So 15 years later, I still haven't told my wife that I'm making indie games. Yep. Got to hide it from her so she doesn't know. Like, hey, nerd, get out of here. Yeah, there's definitely risks, though, right? Like, when it comes to like the professional side too, if you're deciding between getting a job or becoming an indie game dev, when it comes to like being like a solo, like true legit indie game dev where you're working by yourself, there's tons and tons of risk. You can be working forever and end up, selling 3 copies to your mom and your dad, and the one random person that bought it. So it's certainly some risk there, as opposed to like getting a game dev job. Well, there's going to be risk there too, but you're kind of guaranteed a paycheck, and assuming that you try, you're guaranteed to be kind of learning and progressing. With indie stuff, you're not guaranteed that, but if you're self-driven, you can really. I think that it's also possible. I'd say it's probably more risky to be an indie dev than. It's got to be more risky to be an indie dev. It's probably a bit more rewarding in a lot of scenarios, depending on if you're a AAA dev and you're working on a game that you don't care that much about, probably not that exciting. But if you're working on one that you love, it could be just as good. And I would assume if you're building an indie game, hopefully you're working on it because you love it, and you're not in some scenario where you're working on it just because it's your last hope and you've got to do it. So yeah, I don't know.
That's the last thing you said is exactly what I would say is if you're enjoying it and you're not suffering, you're able to pay your bills and stuff, then that seems like a great position to be in, right? You're living your life, having fun every day, and that's it. But the risk is if you're in a situation where, you say, well, I'm not going to get a normal job, but 9 to 5, I'm going to do this instead. And if I fail, I lose my house. Well, then don't take that risk because you're probably going to fail. Most indie development doesn't make a lot of money. Actually, I don't know what the percentage is. So I say most, but I'm making an assumption. I actually don't know what percentage. And I also know what a lot of money is for you, because that could be different for one person for another. But
I'm sure you're right on most, though. I mean, you think about it, most indie games don't get completed. Right? Most of them get started and abandoned or unfinished, or somebody goes to get a job or whatever. And even the ones that launch, I'm sure that it's going to be like an 80-20 rule where 20% are making 80% of the money or more.
Years ago, when every indie GDC had some talk on the indie-pocalypse. I don't know if they still have talks about the indie-pocalypse, but back then they did every year. And somebody had done a talk about Steam saying that the least performing Steam game would make at least 25,000 or something. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I don't know if that was the case then. This was just a person talking.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's not now. There's no way the worst games are making 25,000. That was probably back in Greenlight days. Back when you had to go through a 6-month process and spend 50,000 just to get greenlit.
Or if you're me, you get greenlit in 24 hours just because who knows why. Twice that happened, and in both times, once the Dragon Rider VR game. Oh, Dragon Rider VR, circa 2015. That flopped, unfortunately. The developer decided to move home and not work on the game anymore, and I didn't know how to pick it up at the time. So that flopped. But then the other one, the Barbarian, I at the time I just didn't get the Barbarian on Steam. I couldn't figure some things out, and then it all fell apart, and Unity 5 came out and broke the project, and I was like, so I moved on. And I never got on Steam. But I always wonder, it got greenlit. So I always wonder what would have happened if I had put it out there. But I'll never know. I'll never know.
Have to see on the next one. Oh yeah, it looks like we've got a comment here from DGGO. I don't know. Says according to one source, 30% of indie games, dev games make over, and it's 10K. There's another comment down there, 10K on Steam. But that also means that 70% make less than 10,000, right? Which is probably more than they've spent on the game.
Well, that's when it comes down. You see a lot of indie studios, not indie individuals, but indie studios who are pumping out games all the time, right? Who are working on games, and they're able to produce a simple enough game every month. Yeah, every 3 weeks they can pump out something that's simple and small and really targeted. And if you're making 9K every 3 weeks, for most people, that's okay. That's a pretty decent money. So it really depends on all the stuff. If you're like me and you spend 7 years working on an RPG that you keep getting sidetracked on because you're building a dev kit out of it instead, then maybe it's not the best, and keep your day job.
Right. But I mean, you found a way to build the game that you like and have it still kind of pay for itself through the assets just by reselling and making the stuff available to everybody else too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spend most of the money I make from the assets just goes back into more assets.
Yeah, but you end up, you don't end up going totally broke trying to get hundreds of thousands of dollars of assets made or whatever, like a lot of people do, and they go through their savings and they mortgage their house. And not a lot of people mortgage their house, but a lot of people burn through their savings trying to get this stuff done, and then they realize that it wasn't nearly enough. Getting art made is expensive.
It is. I mean, and I sell my stuff, but most of my characters take 2 to 3 years to pay it back. Like it's, and that's been consistent since 2015 or whatever. So it's not a, I was actually thinking the other day, I was like, so I can't actually right now say, give me 10 characters. I can't do that. because I don't have enough money to order 10 characters all at once. I have to space them out. And after when they make them, I was like, oh, that's too bad. But yeah, making your own custom stuff is expensive. So, and yeah, and I want way more control. I love the asset store. I wouldn't have been able to make the Barbarian without the asset store. I've mentioned before, it was called the Barbarian because of the Barbarian asset from Polygon Maker. Because it was the most customizable character I could get. Different skins. I'll find it real quick. It had different skins and different wardrobe.
Oh, okay. And that's why you went with it, because it was somewhat customizable.
Yeah, that was exactly it. So it was. Here is the link. It was on the forums. I was making this game, and I had hired someone to do the humans for me, and he stole my money. Basically, that's the short version of that. He stole my money, and I had gray blobs that I could do nothing with. And somebody on the forums, you can get some good advice from the forums. You can get some bad advice, like save your RPG data and player prefs. Don't do that. I learned that from the forums. But I also learned from the forums to work with what you have today, not what we hope to have tomorrow. Because for about 2 or 3 months, I was making my game without a main character, thinking, well, the main character is coming, so let me work on the enemy. Let me work on this other thing. But you can't work on all these other things effectively without a main character to run around. So, so I found this Barbarian package from Polygon Maker, and it had multiple. It had some gear too, but it was all about the wardrobe and the skin tones. There wasn't male and female, so I had to abandon that in the game. Sometimes you just got to cut your losses. And
all barbarians are male.
When I finally had my humans done, I updated the game with my own stuff. So I started replacing everything in my game with the stuff I was creating. So I did eventually have male and female hero characters, and I started replacing the enemies with new enemies that I made and stuff. So yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the thing about the asset store. Just work with what you have today, get your game going, replace them later.
Oh yeah,
it's later. Yeah.
You can always upgrade them later. You gotta not wait. I find a lot of people do that where they're like, oh, I'm gonna build this, but I'm waiting for this thing, and first I need to design this character and order that, and they're like, oh, this is gonna take me 3 weeks. Like, why aren't you just like, you can code your game while you're doing that, like while you're coming up with ideas and thinking, or either that or just do the design real quick and then move on to the next thing. Like, there's no reason for this to take 3 weeks, and just get on stuff. And
I imagine there's a play called Waiting for Godot out there that is just about 2 developers waiting for Godot, which is
waiting for the right person.
Yeah, if you know the play, I don't know how many people know the play Waiting for Godot, but it's basically about 2 guys, I think, waiting for God, and God never shows up, and it's just them talking basically the whole time. And so now that Godot is out, I love making Waiting for Godot references because it's appropriate in so many cases, like the whole, oh, I'm going to make my game once I have this. Let's wait for this. Let me wait for this. But, so don't wait for Godot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Just use the stuff that's out there. Use what you can. And yeah, Jules asks, if it's lower risk making and selling assets than full games, I would say probably about the same, right? But doing both at the same time is reducing that risk drastically.
Yeah, it shifts things. So let's say it costs about $4,000 to make a character right now. More for the hero ones. The humans I'm making are way more than that. Yeah. I've already sunk a lot into it that I'm not getting back to.
Like a standard character.
A standard monster, yeah. The mushroom monster can be about $4,000. So yes, you can then sell that, and not many people need those things, so you don't sell that many of them in the end. So it does take a long time to pay it back, but you do a one thing, a relatively small cost, and then your job is to make your money back at that point. If you're making a game, you're going to put money into it, you're going to put time into it, and you don't get paid off until somebody buys it. So you need to finish it and release it. So the cost benefit is stretched out, right? There's a greater risk that you're not going to finish your game than you're not going to finish one character, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, if you don't finish your game, you've lost whatever you put into it that you can't reasonably say was education or fun. If you're having fun and you still didn't finish your game, but you had years of fun doing it, that's still something. That's still valuable. So,
yeah, but I think you're right on the risk part. It's definitely lower because you've got those smaller chunks. You're doing this character, put it out, and you're going to get feedback and know whether or not it's selling pretty instantly, right? It's not like you've got to wait, forever. And with your game, you've actually got to wait quite a while. Welcome, Jason. I see you've got a new haircut. What's going on? I removed part of my beard and you remove all your hair? The hell?
It's too much power. We can't hold that much power. We have to...
Oh, so I wanted to really quickly show this other one. So you talked about using the Polygon Maker stuff, and this is one of the assets I'm using in my pack or in my RPG game, because Polygon Maker has some crazy ass sci-fi stuff. So all these sci-fi characters, and it's kind of like you said, if I wanted to have all these made, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13 or 14 characters in there, times $4,000 each. Like, even if I was able to get them at 1/10 that price, it'd still be insanely expensive, right? So it bundles, like assets, just, I don't know. I think it's the way to go for me. At least for, and I'm using them for everything except for my main hero character, which I had already had made and ready to go. So but right now I'm just using one of them as a placeholder too for that hero until I get them all fixed up and rigged exactly how I want them. But yeah, a giant fan of assets. So welcome, Jason. So I bring you in right in the middle there. That's
I could flip my camera.
Flip everybody around. So how's it going, Jason?
Good. Been a bit busy with work, so sorry everyone. I couldn't pop in as often as usual, but yeah, it's good. I'm getting to play with some fun toys that I haven't gotten to play with before. So yeah,
nice.
It'll be exciting when you can talk about all that stuff publicly.
Yeah. I mean, the closest I can probably do is go like that. That's basically the closest.
Oh, look at that! I've got a thingy.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's cool. It's being able to work on projects again, because normally I do contract work and it's sort of you do snippets of code in someone else's project, so you don't get to kind of dive into the more meaty aspects of game design and planning stuff in terms of mechanics from start to finish. Normally it's sort of a hired gun to solve problems, and so being involved in the creative process again and being able to sort of like write giant treatises on game theory and game design and like what approach we think we should take. It's all stuff that I haven't gotten to do in quite a while, so it's fun kind of flexing some of those muscles again, because you forget. It's kind of like with video editing. I was doing some video editing last week and I realized it's like, oh, I'm like it takes me twice as long to do this as it used to, because I used to do it like every day, and just a little bit of trade-off from. So getting back to some of this stuff is pretty good. Make sure I don't atrophy on some of those.
Yeah, I bet it's got to be nice and refreshing, because you say when you go from just knocking out like, hey, this thing isn't working, can you fix it? And you go like, okay, let me debug this, fix it. Or hey, this thing's slow, can you speed it up? To building out a thing. It's a very different mindset. It's a different kind of problem. And it's, I'd say often a lot more fun, but not always. Sometimes it's fun to just get this problem. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to knock this problem out real quick, fix it. It's going to be a blast. I'm going to go fix 5 things real quick and everybody's going to be super happy. Like,
plus one of the both joys and issues with working with a larger team again is you get to have the debates again about architecture. It's no longer you just choosing what it is you want to do. We've had a lot of the like, okay, everybody give their side. Should we do it this way? Should we do it this way? What are the pros and cons? And so I lost a battle today. Not a big one, but just it was like I wanted to do it some certain way. We settled on something else, but that happens, and it's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, it's more about cohesively being a team unit. So I'm happy to let some of them slide by. But it is fun. It's like being part of that process again.
Yeah, that's always, I think, a blast. Like doing the architectural stuff and like having these discussions back and forth. Like, oh yeah, we should do this, and then it was like, why don't we just do the simple thing? Like, oh yeah, we'll do the simple thing instead. That makes more sense. It's easy. You get into these weird tangents and stuff, and then having the other people. I like that stuff a lot. I wish we could do it right now. I wish it was stuff that you could get into specifics on and then the details on right now. So shortly after, whenever this ends and NDAs are gone, we'll have to dive into some of these specific conversations. Somebody's asking what Story's up to right now. Working on secrets.
I'm back. I'm back on the other side of the curtain again for the first time in a while. I mean, I don't think the studio I'm working for is even announced as a studio name yet. So there's it's kind of early days and stuff.
Secret Studios. Now, there was a question for you, Andrew. I want to pop it up before we scroll down and see what other questions have been popping in. It looks like a lot have come up since Story came in, of course. Has Andrew looked into AI modeling software for making these characters? So I assume you've looked into it, but I've been watching the AI modeling stuff. It's getting good. It's getting way, way better. I don't think it's still not there yet, anywhere near for like production ready, but it is definitely getting pretty damn. It seems like it's on that path. Have you been watching that?
Yeah, of course. Humans are still better there. Humans will be better there for longer than it will be for 2D stuff.
Mm-hmm.
2D is easier than 3D. Animations, we'll see what happens there. I think even with animations, you're going to have humans involved more heavily than one might think right away. 20 years from now, sure, everything's going to be amazing. But for now, I think it's going to be a bit. I think the benefit with AI will probably come from tools that just speed up stuff. That just like animation we've got things like Cascadeur, which I don't know if it uses AI, but essentially does, in the sense that you set one keyframe, you set another keyframe, it fills in the blanks for you. That used to be something you'd have to do much more manually. So now you just do less. Eventually, one could imagine a future where you just say, make this thing walk. And then it figures out what the physics of that thing might be. And you say, yep, that was it. Or no. It needs to lean back more, don't you think? And it's like, oh yeah, my apologies, like ChatGPT. And then it does it right. But for modeling the same thing, I think, eventually you'll be able to say, make it stronger, and it will figure out where the muscles are and know how to do that. But that's going to be, there's so many different levels, because you're working probably with a high poly sculpt, right? And then you still have to estimate that down. You've got to do the map baking. You've got to do the texturing. So there's just a lot more that goes into that than, Midjourney does.
Yeah, you got to do a lot of that kind of post-creation cleanup stuff, which I assume will eventually turn into like somebody's got a service where it generates it all, and then it, does a low res to it, rigs it up, and then puts in some animations and stuff. But it's not here yet. I
will say though,
quite a ways out.
I realize Sovereign might be actually talking about the Taffy, which is Daz 3D. And I think Real Illusion just also announced, I only saw the headline, didn't look into it, what they're calling AI character generation, which I would put AI asterisk character generation, because what they've got huge libraries of flexible characters that use blend shapes. Basically, I like it. I like what they're doing. I stole the concept from them. And so they've got content, basically. They've got massive content libraries. What they're really doing is saying, okay, we've tagged all of our content libraries. We've tagged our blend shapes in a human readable format. Now, if you say, make me a pirate, they can just call up the pirate outfit, put it on the character. Oh, make it bigger. Now they can raise that blend shape up. Make them Asian, change the texture. They're not actually doing an AI character. They're doing an AI dressing character. They're basically saying, we have a library of a lot of stuff. Just tell me what you want. I'll give it to you. But they're not doing generation on the fly. So that's a big, AI is a big buzzword right now. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of AI asterisks coming out before AI comes out in these things.
It's fair.
Yeah.
So they've done a lot of prompting. Yeah, it's what it seems like, but I expect it to just keep getting better. I mean, and you mentioned you use the Midjourney, right, to do your concepts for your 3D characters. Yeah. Have you found that to be super helpful? Because I find like that's my number one use is concepting and coming up with ideas that I want to share, but I cannot explain well enough. Yes. Like if I try to communicate talking to an artist, I can't. But if I just keep going until I get the picture that I'm thinking, like, oh, there we go. That's it.
as many of you know, I enjoy Midjourney. I started doing it when during a sad period when I just had nothing else to do, and I was just sitting there, and I just love it. It scratches an itch, and it's gotten so amazing. I put these things on the asset store for other people to use if they want to use them without having to make them themselves. Honestly, it's getting easier to make cool stuff yourself. So I think this is a well that's going to run dry very, very soon. But I just linked in the chat this cinematic fantasy action shots bundle that I spent a month and a half working on because I just enjoyed getting these images. And the entire time, I was thinking, ooh, I should make armor like that. Ooh, I should make ooh, how can we do a robe like that? Ooh, we need hair like that. That's a cool hairstyle. Every single one is a concept art. Every single one is like, I can send it to an artist and say, make me armor like this, and I'm much more safe. I'm pretty sure one of my armor packs looks way too similar to something from Skyrim at this point.
Because normally what I would do before is like go build a board of a bunch of reference images from other games and like make something that's kind of a morph between these and hope that they didn't go too much on one side or the other. But now I can just generate them.
And at the time I hadn't played Skyrim, so I didn't know that what I chose was from Skyrim, and the artist probably didn't go too far enough away from the source concept.
Yeah, and it's hard to know every game too. I mean, it's also hard to know if the AI stuff it looks like a game too. But I feel like you get so much variation. You got to come up with something relatively different. So I'm curious. Story. I don't know if you saw earlier, I was doing the stream doing some RPG building with RPG Builder. The Blink asset.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, so this morning I was doing some live stream. I'm going to probably do them throughout the week, next week and the next couple weeks, building out a game with it. I was just curious if you've played with RPG Builder recently.
No, this is the integration with Unity, right? Is that one?
Yeah.
Or is that the... Yeah, no, I haven't.
I think you're thinking RPG Maker.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Which is RPG Builder? I don't think I've seen that one.
This is from Blink, publisher Blink. You've probably seen it. Been around for a few years now, and it's basically like a top-down. Or they do first person. You can do first person stuff in that too.
Yeah, it's like by default you're getting a third person camera view here. I'll let me just screen share it real quick. Screen share.
I will say though, I did catch your latest asset, Andrew, and I thought that was pretty cool. I specifically like the pelting it with balls bit. That made me chuckle. I think that was well.
Directional got hit.
Yeah.
All the new ones have directional got hit, and you can pelt them with balls, and they'll react accordingly.
Yeah. So this is that RPG Builder, but it gives you like yeah, you can see like a full-on RPG essentially.
Oh, yeah. I've not played with it myself, but I've seen many a Kickstarter video / YouTube game dev log which showed some of the similar shots, but I haven't actually played with it myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I've used it a long time ago. I haven't used the 2.0. Not in a real environment. I've just kind of played around with it. So I was really excited to kind of dig back into it. I had to grab it on this new account and even have it on my account. Had it on a business account or an old work account. But I've been just kind of diving in and seeing what I can put together with it. And one of the main reasons was like, I just kind of want to build a game and not build out a bunch of systems that I've already coded before. And I just felt like, I've got like, there are some things in there that I want to use, like stat systems where like I want to use stats like a little bit for the chat stuff. It probably won't impact anything else gameplay wise other than just be funny and chat stuff. And I don't want to add a stat system and the UI and all that stuff for that. Like I'll just use the built-in one, right? And keep going with that. So it's been it looks like it's going to be probably my go-to solution for this project. And it's been interesting so far, but I was curious if you had any experience, just because like looking for random tips and advice and stuff, things that I might want to look for or do in there that I might not have thought about. So I was curious. RPG Builder is
I just checked my asset, and I don't even own it. Although I do know Blank Studios. I've had a chat on Discord from time to time, so I never got round to checking it out. They're cool though. I mean, I respect their code quality, so I assume it's pretty good. I've just not actually had a chance to play with it myself. Um, yeah, I guess it's one of those things. It's just down to the genres you like. That's always been a bit frustrating for me. Is like I want to find an excuse to play more with Andrew's assets, for example, but as they're kind of like 80% thematically RPG, and it's just like I don't play RPGs that much, and so it's not. I keep trying to find a reason to use them for stuff, but the closest they ever got was the avatar icons because they could be used in sort of more of a cyberpunk techno-y type vibe, or I used the entire spaceship demo thing I was doing, so they felt a bit broader. So, like I said, I'm still waiting on the sidelines for the day you have a little bit slightly more broader range stuff that I can throw into my project.
Pirates and sci-fi are in the future. Once this new human system's active, it will make new stuff much easier to make.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Kind of like double up your market. I feel like there's fantasy and sci-fi are like the two big themes that you got to go for.
I do have a sci-fi character sitting on my computer that needs to be animated, though. I had one of my modelers who ended up going back to school. Went his last thing before moving into his new school and whatever it was for animation, I think actually for cinema animation, like for movies. He made a sci-fi character. He was like, I can do one more thing. I was like, let's do a sci-fi character, and then but I haven't gotten it animated yet. So we'll see. It should be coming out. I want to get animated. It's some female alien, like mercenary type thing or something. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Maybe you can once you get it animated, send me a copy and I can put it in my game.
Absolutely.
That'd be cool. Even unanimated, I'll just make her a statue. Like,
that's a good use case for all characters, is making them statues.
Yeah, you just make a statue, you put the little rock shader on them, the rock material, you swap it out, and all of a sudden they're a statue. That was always fun in doing that in MMOs. You can make anything into like a statue just by swapping out the shader. Yeah. So there are a couple questions I want to get to while we've got a few more minutes. This one, I think that Story is probably going to have some thoughts on, so go with it first. And Rob was asking, what do you think the best practice is or most efficient way to reuse your own written code assets across multiple Unity projects when developing them simultaneously? Or there's another part to it. Do you copy all of your code every time when you start a new project? And this came up, I think, right after I was mentioning how I was using RPG Builder because I've built a lot of these systems and I don't want to rebuild them. I don't want to copy them in and try to integrate all of them in together with each other, which is largely because I built all of these systems, but I haven't built a lot of them in an RPG framework that's just easy to swap in and out. Right? They're all spread across different projects and stuff, and getting it all working together would be a lot of work. But do you have a strategy for this? And Andrew, do you do anything with it? Because I mean, you do some shared code across all your assets and stuff too. You guys both have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably not the best person to answer this one purely because my approach is more because I do a lot of consulting and contract work. There's sort of some legalities around reusing certain amounts of code, and I also don't like to sort of tie people into using snippets of stuff. So I tend to, funnily enough, rewrite a lot of the same stuff from memory with modifications relative to the current project. So what I tend to do is not really copy as much of the same code, but more attack the same problems, and I might like reference snippets or particular solutions. So what I do is I use an app called Masscode. There's a bunch of them that are out there, and it's basically like a snippet library, and you can just sort of throw up chunks of code. I do it as well on Pastebin and a few other websites, and I just sort of create static classes and static libraries that are just sort of like chunks of code. That way I'm not forcing someone to depend on a DLL. I just sort of like, oh, I need to generate a I don't know, I want to use a Catmull ROM to average out the points in a path to make it smooth. Then I can just go to my search thing and type in curve or smooth or Catmull ROM, and it'll just give me a chunk of code. I drop it in and I just wrap my function in it and so on. Or how do I map a range from one set to another? Or what do I want to do, a Bezier curve? Or what was Google's Android animation curve for UI elements? Oh, I have it over here under Google easing. These kinds of like little snippets. I don't really reuse large chunks of stuff. I do have some libraries. If I'm in a hurry, I have a little utility library of collection types, for example, like a custom heap class or a custom dropout stack or various. I have something I have called a choice or a option. These are like base patterns for handling things like a common one in games, for example, is there's lots of. I talked about this in my Discord last week, which is there's a lot of scenarios where you are looping and you're getting values that are Boolean flags, like is thing in certain state. And you don't want a flag, you want an event. You want to know when it's changed. And so to manage that state requires you to write another flag, check the value and update on both cases. If it is changed, fire event, reset the flag. Now, it's not the hardest code in the world, but it's like a lot of code for what boils down to convert true false into event. And so I have a thing called a choice, I think I called it. No, it was it's one of the many little things in my library. And basically all I do is I create an instance of it, and every time you assign the variable, if the variable has changed from the last one, it dispatches a unchanged event. So it lets you wrap a variable and turn it into a now event dispatcher variable. And so I use that for whenever I have some kind of flag, and it just avoids 2 or 3 lines of code. So stuff like that tends to get reused a lot. But yeah, as for an actual DLL or library, I don't really do that. But the video, very first or the second video on my channel is basically what my recommendation is if you are doing that more regularly, which is create a GitHub repo or just store your code somewhere and then pull it in as a Unity package. Like you can actually pull it in through the not .unity package, but a package system package. Because the beauty of doing it that way is if you update versions on Git, it will just pull down in Unity like a new updated version. And you can even put in sample projects with it that you can then propagate with the project. You can then link the documentation. So my short answer is to the question is if you are actually reusing code a lot, treat your code like an asset for one, right? Make an asset for yourself that represents the code you want to use. Take a look at Andrew's great example with Gitbook, where you have a documentation of the actual how it works and stuff for yourself, because you'll come back to it later and forget what it's doing. And then use that as a reference point, and then just basically give yourself a library that you can import into any project. That would be my recommendation if you're actually doing it. But I don't really, like I said, I don't really do that much myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I generally don't either. So I'm curious. Yeah. What about you, Andrew?
And this is in a way, this is actually Story's answer because he's the one who got me starting to do this. I've got static classes that I use and extension methods that I use. So I have a utilities. In fact, I just 2 nights ago put on my scripting docs there, which you can get to from infinitypbr.com. There's a link at the top. Near the bottom, there is the support classes under additional systems and tools, and you've got utilities and Infinity extensions. Both of these are in my packages because I use them in all the editor scripts. So you got to scroll down the left menu, and then there you go. And so you've got a bunch of like utilities has round this. So it's just send in a float value, get it back, but you can round to a certain number of decimals, which I've always like. Oh, shoot, my stat system is showing 4 decimals. All right, let me just round this to 3 or 2 or whatever it is. But you can do lots of different things. So random float is another one that I use, random float between or best of. So if you want multiple rolls and just get the best of. So in my own RPG, you've got the luck value, and the luck value means if you're lucky, then you get the best of 2. If you're not lucky, you just get a random roll. So that is something that I realized I had coded multiple times, and Jason was kind enough to inform me that static classes are a thing I should be using. It was a couple of years ago. He might remember it because he's got a good memory, but and I was like, holy shit, this is true. So now I've got that, and then the Infinity extensions is just extensions, and so I've got things like is and is not. Is this the same as that, basically? So you can do whatever object you have is it same as something else, and just if it's true or false. Take random shuffle lists around, so you can just do just list.shuffle, and boom, it will be randomized. I just updated that one to have a start or end index, so you can say only shuffle everything after the 5th index, so you can keep the first. Because my loot box system, I was using shuffle, but then I realized sometimes I want to lock the first thing, so I always want this attribute to come first, and this rest can be shuffled. So now I can be like shuffle 1, and it will only shuffle from 1 up. So,
okay. And is that why you've got a reverse in here too?
Yes, because I realized when I had that, I was like, well, what if I want to keep the last indexes and only shuffle the first ones? And so, I talked to my friend Chatty about it, and then I realized, okay, I think I should just build this into the same thing. So we updated it to be this, and yeah, good old Chatty. So there's also a round to decimal here that I realize is duplicated in both scripts because I stole from myself, but it can be used differently, I guess. But,
and you can also you can get really broad with this. Like, for example, here's one that sounds really specific, but you'll be amazed how many times I found good use for it, which is there's a lot of cases in game development, especially for prototyping, where you end up with broadly a path, basically a list of vectors. Whether it's a path things follow, whether it's a distribution of items, whether it's tracking something that's moved, at some point you'll have a list of vectors that actually represent A, B, C, D. They're not just vectors, they're vectors that represent a path of some kind. But if you ever try to follow something along that path, the distribution of the points may be out of whack. So there might be 10 units between the first 2 points, then 3 units between the second 2, and then 12 units between the next one. So I have a function that's just called redistribute that I can extend onto the other one. And what it does is it takes all the points, it counts the number of points, it generates a new path between all the points that is I think 3 times the fidelity. And so it ends up with a much smoother full path where every point is equidistant. And then it removes the middle points from each of those until it ends up with an equidistant distribution that follows the same original path. So from your perspective, it basically just says, I've dotted 7 points, but then you can say redistribute and you'll get back something that roughly follows the same path, but the distance between each point will be identical, which means if you use interpolate between the two, and I have another one called find point on path, which basically lets you pass in 0 to 1 against an array of vectors, and it'll give you a new vector that represents a lerp between the middle point of any 2 points in that path. So basically it means you can say take object, take path, slide 0 to 1, and it'll follow the path. And so between the combination of the two, generate path with something. So for example, have an object that poops out a vector 3 as it walks. It'll just go da 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 da. Take that, redistribute it into a series of points with one line. So you can basically say dot smooth or whatever, or dot redistribute. You end up with the smooth points, and then say get point along line. And so with 2 lines of code, you can have something smoothly follow and track a point at whatever way you like. So these kinds of little things are just sort of, I use them a lot where they're just generate points, redistribute points, average out points, interpolate between points. There's so many scenarios that are roughly the same. And so, yeah, those kinds of extensions onto lists are very, very handy. And with what you were saying about randomness too, I've done the same thing, but I've kind of gone a bit overboard because of various cases I had. I have something where I create a thing called a random, which is my own random. And it can either be a random based on Unity's random or a random based on system random, because I always hate having to manage between the two. And then I can pass that into functions and it'll use that random. The benefit of which is I can create one from a seed. So I can basically say, use a seed across the board, and it'll then use a random and it'll always be deterministic for that particular set. Or I can have it generate different randoms and randomize seeds and save out seeds. And so it gives you the same controls, but it lets you be deterministic if you want to repeat it. And I even have a couple of my own random functions because I looked up the ones Unity uses for its underlying stuff and gave myself some other options. So again, they're very much, there's lots of utilities like that. But just to be careful, I don't like to force people to use a large amount of stuff when I'm teaching it or talking about it. So I don't tend to bring it up that much because it makes it confusing to work with. But I do recommend people do it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I need to add that to my random, the seed, because that's absolutely something I'm going to be using in my own game. The option to have a new seed on load for those who want to say, I didn't like what I got in that chest, let me reload. But for those who want a more official experience, they can keep it on.
And another one that's really great too is something called a weighted random. So rather than just saying pick random from list, you can pass in an array of floats or vectors that have the same amount of entries as the entries in the list, and say use those numbers as weights against those objects. Or you could say select object from list, but pick this property of the object as the weight in the same way you would as a sorter or something. And that way you can do really cool stuff and say take from list, but use weight parameter, whatever. And so suddenly all swords have a 20% likelihood and all axes have a 50% likelihood, but you're still just calling .random with one line of code. It's just doing some of the magic in the background to basically stack, iterate, calculate totals, average out, and give you a more weighted distribution.
I assume that's how your loot tables worked, right? Somewhat similar to that.
Yeah. In a way, my loot system, you specify So there's two components. You specify a list of items, and it's called loot items.
Mhm.
And that loot items is the things that you might get.
Yeah.
And then there's a loot box. The loot box can have any number of loot items and just goes down the list. And then each one of those can have any number of those items in it. So and there's a randomness involved there. You can force it. So if you want like a quest item to always happen, then just put that at the top and say force, then it will always be there. Then you can have random ones that rolls the dice basically. So it's somewhat similar to that, but with what Jason just mentioned is a good idea. Like I want to now investigate how I can say, okay, I have a list of items and I know that there's 5 swords, 3 axes, and 2 spears. I want 33% chance of any one type rather than, 5/8 or 5/9 chance of a sword.
Right.
So that first would choose which type, and then of those, choose which item of that type, again, randomly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've lost track of your loot system now in my head, but when I think back to like every RPG I've worked on, we always had some sort of like a weighted loot table where you give it all of the item tables, and those all have a percentage. And inside of each of the item tables, there are actual items that all have a percentage as well. So you might get 10% chance to get something from the extra rare drop thing, and then out of that, there's 5 items that you could have gotten, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's definitely an important thing to have in there. But I'm sure
I just rewrote it a little bit actually in the last week because I'm updating everything to version 4, which is a major overhaul. And the loop, I was trying to simplify it first because it gets complicated, because it is coming once you start digging into it. You're like, really? Oh wait, this has to be somewhat complicated to get the effect you want. But I realized that I couldn't make it more simple, because what you need out of this, or at least what I wanted to get out of this, was this sense of randomness with control. So I can control the general parameters of what a player is going to get, but I want it to be completely random. I want a scenario where you might get 3 items in a box or 8. I want a scenario where I can control, if the player's luck value is high, they might get a better item, but they don't always, just because their luck value is high. I wanted that randomness, and you realize quickly with loot, in order to make it feel random, yet also have control, it requires a layer of complexity that just has to be there.
Well, I got time for a couple more questions. I want to pop these up real quick. First, Unite, Amsterdam. Have you decided yet? I'm still kind of up in the air. I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of waiting on the final details and plans with kids and all the other things going on. If it's a long enough event and it's interesting and worthwhile, I'd definitely love to go. If it ends up being something minimal where there's not a lot of value, then I might not, because it'd probably be more time away from kids and traveling than actually at the thing. So I still don't know. But what about you guys? Have you guys any updates?
I'm pretty confident.
You're close. You've got to go.
I think the only thing that would likely to stop me is I'm pretty sure my 10-year passport's running out in the next few months, and if I forget to renew that'll be my limiting factor. But in terms of actual, I have bandwidth time-wise to go, and I've got enough savings to make it. So I think I'm on board to go. It's just just make sure I can actually get out of the country. That's the only thing.
I'll be going if somebody else pays for it. So
okay. Fair enough.
Maybe I'll.
Yeah, I'm still a big maybe myself. I'd love to go. It's a lot of traveling, and I got to make sure that I'll actually have stuff to do. That'd be good. Yeah, I think it could be a lot of fun. And then there's a question about developing for PlayStation. Is it difficult? Yes.
How is it different from just developing for a computer?
Mostly. But there's specific hardware stuff as well. But the main pain in the ass is the fact that whenever you on any console traditionally has their own dedicated box you need to get your hands on. You can't just develop for it. Like you have to be approved and be delivered a box, and often specifically set up an IP and have a license to use through the stuff. And there's usually a lot of loops and hoops to get through. And so it's usually not a foregone conclusion, especially things like if you want to get your game on Switch, you can't just make it support Switch. You have to get allowance to be able to use the correct version of Unity that supports doing the Switch releases of stuff or whatever. So there's a lot of extra hoops, and then a lot of at a higher level, a lot of the consoles are they have architectural benefits. So the major benefit of using a console over a computer is, even though a computer has technically more power in almost every possible scenario, the difference is when you have exact knowledge of what the hardware is, you can write exact code that is hyper specific to that particular address and arrangement in the hardware. And oftentimes, if you are deploying for a console or something, they want you to do that. They don't just want you to port your game. They basically go, we have support for a form of level streaming that requires you to format your data in this way to leverage our internal architecture to do that. And so depending on who you're dealing with and what the requirements are and how complicated your game is, there tends to be very stringent rules for, you must hit this frame rate at all times on this, you must do this, this, and this. And quite frankly, it probably is you will miss a lot of the marks on average just by deploying your game. You will have a lot of hoops you'll have to learn how to jump through. Now, one of the benefits of publishers is they almost always have people on hand whose like almost sole job is to act as porters. So traditionally what people do is, rather than you doing it yourself, you just hand wave away 30 to 50,000 of whatever your profits are, and you basically say that's the magic port number. That's someone does that, and then you sort of you just sort of accept that as part of the publisher deal or whatever you're doing. So yeah, the short answer is yes. It can be surprisingly complicated.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And I think you mentioned it right at the beginning, but you've got to get a dev kit first, which requires approval. So first you've got to, and it varies from place to place. With Sony, I've got a little bit more recent experience, but you got it with Sony. You got to like submit the game plan. You get the dev. Once it gets approved, you get the dev kit, but you got to pay for it. And I don't remember the price on those, but we spent somewhere between like $5,000 and $10,000 on dev kits, just on like the dev kits and the extra stuff to hook them up and all that. And a lot of times you want more than one. They're IP locked, so you got like a static IP, at least. From what I remember, they were IP locked and you had a static IP. And so you couldn't just like take that dev kit home and go use it there. Like, it will only work wherever it's been approved. And then the biggest part though, like the dev kits and all that, it's a bit of work and a bit of communication. But if you have a game and a plan, it's not like an insurmountable thing, assuming that the cost isn't a problem. The harder part is both the FPS and load times, especially. Like the number one thing that you'll get rejected for out of the gate is just failing to load fast enough and have the screen be active and responsive. If you have a black screen for, I don't remember what the time is, but I'm pretty sure it was way less than a second. I think it was like half a second or something. You get disqualified. It's like, oh yeah, your screen was black and doing nothing for beyond whatever the amount of time was. And it again varies from systems, so I don't remember the details. But if you broke those, which you always did by default, you'd have to go in and work on that, keep fixing it. And then you've also got, their performance is limited compared to your dev system. So you're optimizing specifically for a slightly older system, usually, and then you've got to build around it. I really miss the old Xbox 360 days, though. You remember when they did the indie thing and you could just...
It was actually a dev console by itself. Yes. Yeah, that was a really cool...
Yeah. You just use the 360, you just hop in X and A, and you could deploy over the network directly to it and just start playing your game. It was the coolest experience. I really wish that... they would go back to, I mean, I'm sure there are reasons like that it probably didn't generate a whole lot of revenue or value for them because there was a lot of little tiny games.
The main reason is if they don't and they go through the validation process, they could, in the case of Fez, charge you $10,000 to do a patch for your game. There was a funny story. I'm pretty sure it was Fez. It was some indie game, some relatively small indie game that released a patched update. But the update itself had some sort of bug in it, just a small like, oh, whoops, I forgot this one line of code. And it's like, oh, I just fixed it. Can I actually just update it? And they're like, yeah, that'll be another 10,000, please. And it's like, sorry, I just pushed it like literally the last couple of days ago. And they're like, yeah, every patch, every update costs 10,000 to deploy. And so he's like, well, he just basically put out on Twitter, there's a bug. You get to have the bug now, everybody, because I'm not paying 10,000 to fix like this stupid small thing. It's like, yeah, so that's probably why they want to have the dev stuff locked down, because they can charge you a lot for the process.
Yeah. Well, I assume it's probably more so they don't have to spend money on people doing it for all the free people. So you charge $10,000 and you get rid of 1,000 people asking for these updates every day. Like it just disappears. It looks like it was Fez. And Twisted Liver says you can still do that with the Xbox with the right dev account. I'm gonna have to, I need to get a Series X. I don't have one yet. I should probably do that. I mean, Starfield's coming out. I want to play that, so I'll definitely do it. And it probably also works as a floor for QA. Yeah, I mean, they make you optimize your game, and there's a reason for it. They want a good experience on there. They don't want it like, oh, I play PlayStation games and they're shitty, or I play Switch games and they take 2 minutes to load. Like they want it to be fast and a smooth experience, like everything else.
Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like, the takeaway is, your game that you've been working on is the most important thing in your life. To them, you're just another person delivering another thing on another platform. And it is worth like understanding that. But the only thing that makes me a bit cynical is I've worked on projects where the platform holder really wanted this project because they're going to put it in their marketing, and I've worked on projects where the marketing team doesn't really care. And so the level of support you get is night and day. And right down to all of those rules, all of those different things, they go, we'll figure it out. We'll handwave it. It's fine. We'll get you what you need. And then the other ones are just like, it feels like arbitrary gating. I understand why it's there, and I fully respect that. Like, I prefer storefronts that are more curated. But it's just, there hits a point where you know that if you have a very powerful platform and a lot of people are developing for it, it can make you a bit cynical if you happen to be on the wrong side of that too many times, and you realize that there's almost certainly they actually want you to either give up or just stop dealing with them, to the point where some of that stuff is just like, they know it's a pain. They know they could make it easier for you, but they actually like the fact that it's enough friction that gets rid of a lot of people, because to them it's not going to make money for them anyway, and so it's up to you to fight for your project to motivate yourself past it, and you should. But there hits a point where like some of that friction is 100% artificial and you can feel it, and that's the bit that makes me a bit frustrated sometimes.
It's fair. So are you gonna release the Barbarian on the consoles now, Andrew?
The Barbarian, I have the code, I think, but it is written in Unity script. And I think when Unity 5 came out and C# was the only one option available, there was something like 100,000 console errors or something. I'm sure today I could probably fix them relatively easily, but to do that, I would have to redo the game from scratch, which is fine if I were to do that, because it would be a better game than it was. It was fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. It barely crashed, but it could have been better because it was my first big game.
Yeah, I had to open up a recent Unity 5 project, and you just instant see of errors, and I'm like, you know what? We're going to close this and pretend it didn't happen. I'm not dealing with this right now.
Open it next year. Have you tried 2023, by the way?
I have not, no.
Yes.
Or is it?
Yeah, it's in beta now. I've been playing with it loosely a little bit for the multiplayer play mode, and just experimenting a little bit with it. It's definitely interesting. New splash screen and stuff. It'll be curious. I'm really curious to see if like 23 is when a lot of the performance improvements really start to hit too, because it seems like it's loading faster, but I haven't actually profiled it yet. So I'm wondering if it seems like there's less stuff in the default editor too. So I'm wondering if that has changed a lot. I don't know for sure, but I'm kind of curious. So I guess it's almost time for us to wrap up, but I wanted to really quickly mention Andrew's birds again. You got the birds and the dogs. I tried to link the dogs, but I messed up, and apparently...
Are those birds new? I've not seen those before.
Just came out.
Yeah. Right, okay. I was kind of thinking, it's like...
12 hours old from hatching.
Have you not been watching all night? You don't have your alerts for Magic.
You haven't done a video of this one yet. I only catch whenever you do a YouTube video announcement, and I've not seen one for these yet. So.
Yeah, I think you did a stream last night, right?
I didn't stream last night, no. But
I got a notification.
I don't think I streamed last night.
Weird.
It was just
that was probably the video of the race that dropped recently.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So
okay.
2 yesterday, both the birdie, low poly, and the update for the Weeper. Yeah.
Which I think is actually right. If you click here, you get the demon dog. I got the wrong link on here for the bundle.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, somebody mentioned it. So there's the bundle, and then they're asking about the bigger bundle. One of those goes to the new demon dog as well. So
they're there. You just find it.
Yeah. Oh, but I did want to mention before we go to the AI day. So I think it's still going to be August 26th. There's a link in the description. We've got free tickets available. We're just going to host an AI conference, a one-day thing just on the latest AI game dev stuff. Again, it's a large part of this is so that I can stay updated on what's coming out with the AI stuff and get experts to come speak and share all of the coolest stuff. So if you're interested in AI and game dev, want to see like the new tools and the new techniques and stuff that's, as of, it's going to be in 2 months. So hopefully it'll be like the stuff at the end of next month that we'll be kind of diving into and the latest tech. Make sure you sign up, and we'll have probably some online, some options for like meetups and stuff to go talk to people and stuff as well. And also, I mentioned it at the beginning. No, I mentioned it in the previous stream. I haven't mentioned it here. Sometime in July, I'm still trying to get this together. I haven't got enough recruiters locked in yet, but I want to do an online job fair for game developers looking for remote jobs, or maybe some in-person ones too. But I know there are lots of recruiters that contact me all the time that have positions open and they're trying to hire. And there are lots of people who are developers who watch the show and are looking for positions. So I really want to just kind of help get all of them together in like a one-day event in Gather for a few hours. So you can just go talk to the people, see the job openings, and go share your resume and talk to people and see if there are some opportunities. I assume at least a few people probably find a good position out of there. So if you're interested in that, and especially if you happen to be a recruiter, please email me and let me know, or if you got thoughts on how to make that event really work out well. I'd love to just have like a big open online game dev nerd job fair, like run around like, hey, here's a bunch of companies that are hiring and looking for people, and you can run over there and share your resume and talk to their recruiter for a few minutes and see if they got something that matches, and just kind of get people together all at once. So I know like in-person job fairs happen all the time, but there really aren't many for game devs, and it seems like it could just be a fun, free thing to do. No reason not to. So if you're interested in that, especially if you're a recruiter or know one really well, please send me a message. Let me know. I'd like to get a bunch of them in there, get a bunch of spots open. So you guys got any other things you want to mention or talk about before we go?
Just a reminder to Andrew to finally get around to watching my Game Dev Guild talk that we talked about. I know you haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, he's got a tracker. So
speaking of, I forgot if I asked you, you're still good for that to be 100% public, right?
On my side, sure, yeah.
Yeah, all right. I was going to post it on my page too, just to get it out there, let people make sure they go see it. Yeah, but please, put it up there. And is it already on your site now? On your page?
No, I've only got it in my Discord at the moment. So if you want to see it, you can join the Discord. It's in the
if you want to put it up on your YouTube channel, that's fine. I'll just link directly to it. If not, I'll pop it up on mine. But I feel like there are a couple talks on there that I wanted to just get out there in front of everybody. I just have to get around to do it. I just got to make sure that everybody's good with it too. Get everybody's approval before I go put their stuff up publicly. Cool. Anything from you, Andrew, other than they should go grab the bird, obviously?
If you like birds, I expect Lovebird Lab already did. But yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Oops, that's the bird.
I think we got should have another character coming out soon. The jumper will be another. I just saw the animations last night. They need some updates, but only a few, and I was quite happy with them. And I looked at them and I was like, wow, it's really cool. I like this one. So
that's awesome.
Sometimes I can impress myself.
I want to see that, and I want to see your alien character, so I can. Does your alien character kind of match with the Polygon Maker ones?
It does. It will be a little bit higher fidelity, I think, maybe, but I can't. Depending on when he made those.
Okay, yeah. Well, so these kind of vary in fidelity. I notice like some of them are like super high res, some are kind of like the older ones are a little bit lower, but they all fit perfectly for what I want to do. I'm using those, and there's one other set of what is it? It's the other one that I use all the time. One of my other favorites. The other sci-fi character bundle. What's it called?
Polygon, Protofactor.
Yeah, it's the Protofactor one. It's pack 1, sci-fi characters pack 1, because it's just got all kinds of cool aliens, and it's got that walker platform thing, the big yellow one that like walks around as a moving platform, and put that in the spaceship hangar and have that be a big part of the game, or at least a part of the game. I don't know. I got lots of random crap flying around my head. And ever since watching Babylon 5, now I'm just like struggling to make sure that I don't turn it into a political space station game where you're playing as the commander. I mean, get way too. Have you guys seen Babylon 5?
No.
Okay, you should watch it, Andrew and Jason. It's awesome. I've been rewatching it. It's been so long since I watched it. I'm like rewatching. I'm like, oh yeah, it's actually good. Maybe I'm just old. I feel like now I'm basically like the old grandpa watching cowboy westerns.
Sci-fi is my jam. If it's, I've watched everything from Odyssey 5 to Farscape to I've seen them all. So that's my genre in particular. I've watched a lot of that stuff.
Nice. All right. Well, before we go, there's one last thing that we should definitely share. Somebody was trying to find Jason Story's Discord, and I've got it right here. You want to briefly tell everybody about that so they can hop in?
Yes. So as we've talked about before, there's a AI is growing as a monstrous problem, and I've never liked bots as it was. Discord has become a bit of a pain in the ass to manage. So for the respect of my poor suffering mods, I have it locked. So you can only get access to it if you have some small indication of a donation. And so the link is probably to my Ko-fi page, I imagine. And there you can donate whatever the lowest amount. I literally just set it to whatever the lowest amount is, and it's just a gate to basically stop horrible amounts of spam. It's a one-time, any amount at all, and you'll have infinite access beyond that point. And yeah, you can hang out with the various crowd of people there. Your Eye's a regular poster, and we basically talk programming and whatever nonsense comes to mind on a regular basis. And then there's a few talks and things that we've done that are sort of linked in the channel as well.
Yeah, and I like I said, see, one of the few, or probably the only Discord that I like kind of consistently watch, just because the conversations tend to be interesting stuff. So I highly recommend go hopping in there and just at least lurking and seeing the kinds of things that get talked about. Here's that Babylon 5. This is, by the way, I keep talking about it. It's because Powell mentioned it. He tweeted about it last week that they were releasing this movie, the new Babylon 5 movie. And that's what got me kind of in the mode. That plus I was already in the space station RPG game mode. So this like really hit for me. So that, and I think I'm just old. Cool. All right. Well, if this was helpful, I guess, please hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. Drop a comment below if you got any thoughts. Even if you don't have any, just say hello. And I guess we'll be back next week. Any last words, guys?
Goodbye.
That's two very good last words. All right. Bye, everybody. I didn't